Yes, thank you everyone for coming. I know, well, it was sunny up here. It's not so sunny now, but I appreciate you taking the time out of a nice sunny afternoon. I'm going to take you briefly through the webinar agenda and start off with some introductions. So I'll introduce myself first of all. My name is Sue Hayes and I'm a subject and curriculum advisor for Learning by Questions. I have over 15 years experience in the secondary maths classroom. 6 of those were as head of department. My current role with Learning by Questions involves writing question sets and developing secondary maths content for our platform. And I still do some teaching at some local football academies, and I do a bit of tutoring as well. So I still get my maths teaching fix, which I think is really important. I'm joined today by my colleague Al. Al, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Al. I did my PGCE about 20 years ago now, and I came out full-time teaching just about 18 months ago. So sort of like the rigor and the demands of full-time teaching is still very much fresh in my mind. During my career, I had lots of different positions, head of department, assistant vice principal, but everything was always science related, overseeing science. Yeah, so that's me.
Thanks, Al. Okay, so just quickly to take you through an overview of the session today. It's obviously all about feedback today. So we'll be looking at what the purpose of feedback is. We'll be looking at what makes feedback effective, what types of feedback we use most. And then we will, as Talza mentioned, we'll get an opportunity to get onto the Learning by Questions platform and look at how Learning by Questions can help improve the power of feedback in your classroom. So at this point, you will need to open another tab or have another device available, but I'll talk you through that when we get there. There will then be a question and answer session at the end. And as Talza has already mentioned, it is about sharing good practice, and we know there'll be a wealth of good practice out there. So please feel free to pop something in the chat, and Talisa will either chip in or she'll save it to the end for our question and answers. Okay, so without further ado, I'll move on and look at the first slide, which is all about the purpose of feedback. And there's some key considerations here, I think. The first consideration is, why do you want to give feedback in the first place? And there are many reasons why we give feedback to pupils. It may be that we're following a homework or marking policy. We may be returning test scores on a summative assessment, or giving some quick verbal feedback based on a retrieval starter task. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that when feedback is used well, it can push pupils' learning forward. So our main focus when thinking about why we give feedback to pupils should always be how our feedback can help them to progress. So coming to you, Al, what ways have you used feedback to accelerate pupil progress?
Well, if we're talking about accelerating pupil progress, first of all, what I want to say is that as teachers, we put a lot of effort into our planning. We put a lot of effort into the work we do outside lessons to try and make sure that the pupils are receiving quality feedback either in the lesson or outside. And if by the end of that feedback, the students can't say, well, listen, I've learned from this feedback that this was something that I really couldn't do before. It was something I was really weak at. This is what I was doing wrong. Now I know that I should be doing this instead, and therefore I can now perform better. If they can't see that at the end of the feedback, then all that work we're putting in does kind of get wasted, and we don't want to be doing paper exercises with all the hours and hours that we've got to work as teachers. So I will discuss some strategies later on, but for now I just want to sort of highlight kind of 3 things for me about feedback, that if we're going to achieve that goal of making it accelerate progress, we want it to be timely. We want it. The faster we can implement that feedback to a student, the faster a student can get feedback, at the moment of need, if possible, the more effective it's going to be. The feedback has to be something that the student can act upon. It's all right telling a student something, but can they act upon it and implement it? And are they given opportunities to practice the feedback that's been given? And also, thirdly, something I think certainly I did for years and years and years, a trap I fell into when I was giving feedback to students who really struggled to grasp with a topic. I tried to go a little bit too deep. And if we're talking about accelerating progress, then, we can remember that we don't have to necessarily re-explain an entire topic to a student. Just a nice light sprinkling can accelerate the progress of some students who are really, really struggling. An example might be, I talked a lot last week about electrolysis, but if you've got a student who's no idea what reduction, for the science teachers out there, who've got no idea what reduction or oxidation is or the purpose of electrolysis, great feedback for them, it's going to accelerate them straight away, would just be to learn how to name the anode and cathode, learn how to name the parts of an electrolysis cell. So yeah, I certainly fell into that trap for a while, going too deep. But we'll talk about some more specific strategies later on soon.
All right, thanks, Al. Okay, so looking back, moving forward onto our next point, how do we want to give feedback? So feedback can be given to pupils in various ways, and we will be looking at this in more depth a little bit later on. But for now, though, I want to touch upon something that Al has already mentioned, and that's the timeliness of feedback. If our main purpose of giving feedback to pupils is to improve their learning, then surely we want to give feedback as soon as possible to prevent misconceptions becoming embedded. And now when marking books and assessments, this can be a difficult task. So coming back to the timeliness, Al, what ways can feedback be delivered to pupils so it is in a timely manner?
Well, to me, timely means within the lesson itself. I mean, all our schools will have their own policies about reflection time when we've marked books and what happens the lesson after. But to really, really accelerate the progress of those students, feedback being given literally at the point of need is going to be the absolute goal. Now, as a teacher, we might teach a class with 30 students in. And once we've done the teaching bit, once we've settled the children down, etc., I would be amazed if we had even 30 seconds to spend with each of those 30 students within a lesson. We've got within the 50-minute or the 1-hour lesson. So what we have to do if we're going to deliver effective feedback, we have to learn ways to spread ourselves as thinly as we possibly can. I'll just give you 2 or 3 examples of things I did, but I'm really interested in the chat as well to share ideas. If you can type away and let us know what you've been doing. So one of the things I used to do was really, really try and make use of modeling as much as I can. I think really effective feedback as teachers can be given because we know the subject really well, because we are experienced and we know the misconceptions that students develop. We can plan that into the lesson. One way I did it, and again, I'm speaking to the science teachers, might be, let's use a topic of momentum, for example. When we're teaching momentum, we know going into the lesson, when we're planning the lesson, that students might struggle with the concept of what a vector is. You know, momentum's a vector, velocity's a vector. They might not quite understand what that is. They might not be able to rearrange equations effectively. They might struggle with units, you know, kilogram meters per second as opposed to kilogram per meter per second, which is what students like to say, you know, it rolls off the tongue better. We know what these misconceptions are going to be. So when I was teaching, we tried to build up a bank of resources, and the one that I would use for momentum will be a PowerPoint slide, and it had 4 different corners to it, where each of these misconceptions were addressed, almost like what a bad one looks like, or a wabble, if you're familiar with that term. And there would be an incorrect student working out to a problem in one of the corners of that slide, and then feedback from me on what that particular student did wrong. And I'd have 4 of those on the screen. And then while I was going around the classroom, a student might put the hand up and say, oh, listen, sir, I'm really struggling on question 5. And I would know that question 5, you know, I'd have a quick look at what they're doing. And I know that for them, question 5, they're suffering from the top left misconception on the PowerPoint. So rather than me having to spend time with them and away from other students, my first point of call will be, brilliant, just have a look at that top left picture on the board. And I know as I walk away from that child, they are receiving feedback from me that I've planned into the lesson. They're my words on the board, but they're receiving those kind of in my absence, if you like. And if that didn't work, then they knew to put the hand up again. And I'd come down and I'd spend a bit more time with them. But that kind of technique really allowed me to spread myself more thinly than I normally would and allow all students to get kind of the feedback that I wanted them to get. Now, it takes a while to build up that kind of bank of resources, but once they're there in a department, they are there. Another thing that I like to do, which was a bit more timely, I'll be honest, was if I was creating a particular worksheet, I might just get the Viz-Eye, or you might call it the USB camera or whatever, and I would show myself, film myself working before the lesson, working through the problems. And I'd chop that little video up into individual sections, 1 for each question. The whole thing might take about 15 minutes. And they will be stored on the school's area that the students could access, or on YouTube via a link, or wherever. And when those the students were working on those problems on their digital tablets, if they were really, really struggling, and I come over, perhaps I didn't have time quite to sit and spend time with them, they could simply click the link at the bottom and they could get, again, feedback from me. It was like I was spreading myself around all the students, and they could all get my feedback at any point during the lesson. And of course, those strategies are great, but they all come with their own issues. There's a lot of work. Can they be abused? by students, for example. So what we're really looking for is a method of giving feedback at the point of need to all students that can't be abused and that is really, really highly effective.
Thanks for that, Alison. Really nice insight.
I'd just say as well, with those methods of feedback, they're so good because once you've created them, they just last forever, and then you've got them, which is so great.
Yeah,
absolutely. They take a lot of work. They do take work, and they are extra work in your planning. But once they're there, you know, they are there, and you take them with you wherever you go.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for that. Okay, so moving on to our next bullet point. What do I want my pupils to do with the feedback? And again, Al, you have kind of alluded to this about talking about reflection time and things like that. But in order for feedback to be truly effective and improving learning and progress, pupils need to act upon it, and they need to have the time to do that. The process of receiving feedback, digesting it, thinking about it, and then thinking how they're going to move forward from it all takes time, but is shown to embed learning, improve self-confidence and independence in our learners. So it's really crucial. A little bit of feedback can result in so much progress being made. So again, coming to you, Al, how have you managed to make sure that the pupils engage with feedback that they receive?
I think if done right, and I know we're going to get onto this later on, but if done right, it should be a part of the lesson. As teachers, we are really excellent at dealing with a large number of people, all with different needs. And, you know, over the years, we developed the experience to deliver feedback. A lot of the things perhaps we talk about, we do already in our sort of day-to-day teaching, but done right, it is part of the lesson. It's part of the culture that you create, that learning environment you create in the classroom. So the kids may not even realize that at certain points they're getting direct feedback with the way that you're delivering it. But a lot of schools will have explicit times. Obviously, they'll have explicit reflection times. It may come in the form of a starter in a lesson. What I used to do in between lessons, if we're talking about outside teaching time now, when I marked a set of class books, rather than thinking about individual targets for individual students, I'd think about sort of maybe the top 5 or 6 misconceptions that the class as a whole were picking up. And I would create a short little feedback sheet that addressed each of those 5 misconceptions with a little task. Now, you know, this is quite a common technique, green for growth, you might call it, or I'm sure all schools have got their own little names for it. But that will be one sheet. It wouldn't be too much work to create. I would stick it in the student's book. And then after looking through the notes, I would circle the particular feedback and the particular kind of do now task or green for growth task that was specific for that child. So not only are they getting the feedback that they need, but they're also getting a chance to implement it and put it into place. But I will hark back to, you know, when we're talking about how do they engage with feedback, the most important feedback is within the lesson at the point of need. When does a child really need help? It's not the day after they've done the lesson, the day after they're stuck. It's all well and good and it looks great in the books, but it's there and then at the point of need. And again, we'll get to that later on.
Thanks, Sal. Just one last thing on this slide. Does the feedback that I give help pupils? And this is, in essence, the most important factor, which I think we've probably talked about a lot in this bit. So when you're planning your feedback for pupils, you just must make sure that it's going to improve their learning in some way. Okay, so moving on to the next bit, just looking at what makes feedback effective. And I thought I'd have a look at some quotes for this. So I've trawled through quite a few here and I found a few that I really like. So this first one, effective feedback is not praise or criticism. It's carefully chosen language and actions that propel the learner forward, which is the key bit. So for instance, I could give some praise saying to a pupil, that was a great score that you got on your maths homework. But this isn't really feedback. That's just a nice thing to say. Arguably, a better response would be, you answered question 6 really well because you showed me all your workings and I could see how you got to the answer. Can you go and do the same for question 9, please? That second response is going to propel the learner forward. They know what they did correct on that one, or what they did better on question 6. They now know that they need to apply that same logic to question 9. So you should always be looking to not just give praise. Praise is lovely and it's great and it has its place, but to move the learner forward, it has to be something proactive that they can do and they can act on. The second quote I found is this one, that feedback should be a dialogue rather than a one-way communication, and it should be to do with the learning outcomes and allow them to reflect. So a conversation is a really good way to deliver feedback, but it's very, very hard to mimic in a written response. And lots of schools over recent years have adopted like a many coloured pens approach, where the teacher marks in red, then the pupil comes back with a comment in green, then the teacher goes back with a comment in purple, and all of this. Now, not only does this take a considerable amount of time and effort, but quite often the impact of the feedback is lost over time. And I think this is what Al was alluding to, saying it needs to happen in the moment in the classroom. When that happens, it has the most impact. So again, we're coming back to that feedback needs to be delivered in a timely manner. Now, the last quote I found was this one, and it's quite a big ask, to be honest. So feedback should be timely, intimate and individual, empowering, sensitive, and manageable. And it would be amazing if all of these attributes could be contained in some feedback, because they would undoubtedly improve pupil outcomes. But we'll come back to that. All right, so next thing we're going to be looking at is what types of feedback do you use? And as teachers, we all use lots and lots of different types of feedback all the time, almost without being aware of it. So we're just going to have a look at some commonly used types of feedback. First of all, informal. Now, informal feedback is your bread and butter in the classroom. I would say it's often spur of the moment and unplanned, but as it is at the time of need, it is super, super effective. And pupils can act on that feedback immediately, enabling them to progress through the work and making progress within your lesson. The next one, formative feedback, can be both formal and informal, but crucially, it informs a pupil of how they can improve. And it's so important that with this type of feedback, that time is allowed for reflection and for them to act on it. So Al, I'm going to come to you on this one. How have you used formative feedback?
So formative feedback, and I'm going to start to sound a bit like a broken record just for now, but how have I used it? I think I gave a couple of examples before, but to me, formative feedback is right there and then when it is needed. And, you know, I was just thinking when you were talking before that you've got 30 students in front of you, every single student needing help at the same time. How do you spread yourself that thin? So the best ways, the most effective way I've been able to do it is to find techniques where students can kind of be learning from teacher feedback in my own absence. And I know this is the last time I'm going to say it, I know we're going to get to how we would do that. But to me, that's when it's the most effective.
Thanks, Al. So formative feedback, summative feedback then is usually associated with things like assessments or maybe end of topic tests where you've used specific mark schemes and things like that. The data produced from these assessments can be then used by us teachers to assess progress over time and give us a useful glimpse into how the pupils are performing. But how useful is summative feedback to the pupils? It's ironic because summative feedback is something that the pupils ask for. If you dare to give them a homework back without having 6 out of 10 or 60% written on it, it's like, well, how did I do? So it's quite strange that they crave that number or that quantitative type of feedback, but it's actually the qualitative that's sometimes a lot better. So Al, how have you used summative feedback and when has it been most effective?
You know, I often think that summative feedback a lot of the time is more useful to the teachers, the schools, and parents as well. Parents want, they want a figure than it is really to the students. Although the flip side of that is, like you said, it's the thing that the students want. The students really want to know, what have I got out of 10? What percentage did I get on this test? That's their goal, and the rest of it kind of, it becomes a little bit less important. But I tried to develop a culture where the summative feedback was just part of the learning process. So yes, the students did get the grade they wanted. The heads of departments and line managers and parents got the grade they needed. They got the data they needed, and all that is great. But I made it part of the learning process. So I would always, for example, have 2 versions of an assessment. One that the students sat, and then the other version of the assessment was a mirror of the original assessment. So when I say mirror, I don't mean the same questions, but question 1 on each assessment would assess the same skills or the same type of knowledge, obviously different questions. And then once the summative tests have been given back and we spend that time really pulling it apart and digesting it in class, walking, talking mocks, some people would use that kind of term. Once we've really done that, I would hand the students the mirror assessment. And they would know by then, obviously, which questions they got wrong on the first one, and they would attempt the questions that they got wrong on the mirror assessment, slightly different questions, and hopefully we'd see, a great deal of progress from that. I always found that really, really useful. I think the kids really liked it. You know, they were able to go home and say, well, I only got 60% on the test, but actually, when I did the same type of question again, I got them all right. So if I did it again, I'll be fine. And it boosts the confidence of those that don't do so well. But to me, yeah, we've got to fall on the trap of summative assessment actually just being something for the school, you know, and for the spreadsheets. It's got to be focused on learning.
Yeah, you need to make it count, and that certainly would, because like you say, straight away it improves the confidence and things like that. Just one last point on this slide, and I've put peer assessment on here, and the feedback it generates, really, because that again happens in the moment in the classroom, and sometimes the feedback the children get from the peers can be really, really impactful. Obviously, it can vary on how effective it is depending on the group of peers, but it can be so effective for children to have that peer feedback in the lesson. One more slide before we get.
Sorry, we've had quite a few people on the chat share some good practice. So do you mind if I just read some?
Yeah, jump in, absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, so there's quite a lot of talk about various different technology. Kahoot's been mentioned. Mini whiteboards, a goodie but an old. Sorry, an oldie but a goodie. Mini whiteboards are so great. Use of journey focus questions that appear marked one week, then teacher marked the following week.
Nice.
Google School here, we found self-marking Google Forms can be good for quick feedback on concrete facts and information, and they use websites like Gimkit and Kahoot and BlueKit. I hope I'm pronouncing those right. MS Forms, BlueKit quizzes, is that one? Yeah, I think that's it. But yeah, lots of technology being used to assist teachers, which is great.
Absolutely, and if it is assisting teachers in giving quality feedback, then it's amazing, isn't it? And that's perfect. Okay, so yeah, before we get on to our own interactive little bit, I just want to go through some points that were made by Wiggins back in 1997, which is ages ago, but they really resonate with me, and they're very relevant in 2022. So these are 4 criteria for quality feedback. Firstly, it must be timely. We've mentioned this loads, and this is obviously why a lot of our audience today are using things, quizzes in classes, because that's where the feedback counts most, and that is absolutely what we should be doing. So it must be timely, it must be happening in the moment, if it at all possibly can. It needs to be specific as well. Quite a few bits of technology these days, if a pupil's got something wrong, directs them to a video, which is all well and good, but if the video is too wide a topic area, it's really hard for the pupil who's struggling to pinpoint the bit that they need to help them with that particular question. So being specific is really, really useful. It must be understandable to the receiver. Talking to a lot of science and maths teachers, we'll all know that the language we use in science and maths can almost be a barrier to learning sometimes, because it is quite complex. So any feedback that's given needs to be understandable, therefore becomes actionable by the pupil as well. And again, here we go, I've just mentioned it, but the student needs to be able to act on the feedback, otherwise it's pretty pointless. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and this is the time that you can actually get to be a bit more interactive. Thank you for your input to the chat anyway, but you are now going to try and get online, please. So if you can just go to another tab, and I need you to enter this URL, please, which is www.lbq.org/task. And that will take you to a page where you can just enter this code. So YMVM, I couldn't say it then. And that will take you to 2 tasks that I've set up today. I've set one task up for maths, which is on ratio. We've got another task on quantitative chemistry. If you dare do that, I wouldn't want to be doing that one personally. But yeah, have a go. The one thing I do ask as you're working through, can you please try to get some of the questions wrong, please, because then you will see the feedback that you get from it. And as we're talking about feedback today, that's the most important thing. So I'm going to stop talking for a bit, and if you can just have a go and see what you can do. And yeah, I'll be back in a minute.
I noticed you've got the matrix on the screen, Sue, and are you going to mention this at some point?
Yes, we will be. Just let it start filling up so I can see that's the ratio one first. I'll just have a click over, see what's going on in science. So yeah, people have found it. It's there. We've got a few getting on there. Although I personally would be doing the ratio one at this point. Okay, right. I've just put, yeah, I'm so sorry, it's only a very small snippet, but I'm just very wary of time here. So what I've done now is I've paused the task. So as a teacher, I have ultimate control and I can just stop you in your in the midst of you doing lots of lovely questions. Thank you for getting on there. And I just think it's really useful to actually see it in action. What you will see here is the teacher's data matrix. So the data that is generated is live data and it's there in the moments of learning or not learning, as the case may be. And you can see here, I've got all sorts of bits of data that tell me how well my pupils are doing in the classroom. So I can see that maybe question 4, looking as a whole class, question 4 might have a bit of an issue. We've got lots of reds on there, and certainly someone's had to try it 7 times to try and get it. We don't limit the number of times that a child can try a question. They can try it as many times as they need to. But it just gives you tremendous insight into how your pupils are dealing with that task and finding that task. So not only do pupils receive dedicated feedback as they are going through the task, but it also gives me as a teacher an opportunity to really target and personalize my feedback when I go and speak to that child. If I can see that they're getting really frustrated with it, I'm obviously going to give them slightly different feedback to someone else. So it gives you tremendous insight, and it's almost like a bit of a superpower there in the classroom. So I'm going to unpause it in case you do want to carry on doing bits and pieces. If it'll just let me, hang on. It's just going a bit slow here. And I'm just going to go back to my slides. I'll just click this again. Give me a moment. Right, okay. Right, so moving on, we've obviously seen that we do have feedback on our question set. But I just want to dig a little deeper on this to see how the feedback's structured and how it really does dig down to each question. So I'm going to start with a science question here, Al.
Yeah.
Take over because I don't know what this is about.
Yeah, we'll talk through this. But I do want to mention this very quickly. If you did cast your eye on the screen a minute ago and you saw the results coming in live, we talked about feedback being necessary at the point of need. And we could see on one of those questions, for example, just one person getting that question wrong continually over and over again. Now, that person in class might be a shy child, a ghosting child, somebody that wouldn't normally let you know that they need help and feedback right at that particular time. But with access to that as a teacher, when you're looking at that matrix, you can see straight away and you can target them and give them the feedback they need in that moment. You know, it doesn't get more timely than that. However, let's have a look at how we try and construct the feedback. I've mentioned a few times today about trying to predict misconceptions, about trying to predict problems students might have, and then creating resources where students are getting teacher quality feedback, even in the absence of yourself, because you're dealing with somebody else. So for the I know a lot of you are mathematicians from what we just saw on the matrix, or a lot of you are doing the maths one. So I'll just very quickly explain this question here if you're not scientists. We've got calcium hydroxide over on the left on the question. And the formula of calcium hydroxide, the Ca and then the OH2 in brackets, tells us that within that molecule, we have 1 atom of calcium. And because the O and the H, the oxygen and hydrogen in brackets, we have 2 oxygen atoms and 2 hydrogen atoms. And that's superscript 2 there is telling us that we've got 2 of each. Now, this question is asking us, basically, if you're not a scientist, what is the mass of that molecule? And to figure out the mass of that molecule, all we're going to do is add up the sum of the parts. So on the screen, we can see, yeah, that's really highlighted there. So calcium has a relative atomic mass of 40, hydrogen 1, oxygen 16. So if we add all those together, the 2 oxygens, the 2 hydrogens, and the calcium, the student should come up with a mass of 74. That should be the right answer. Don't do anything yet, though. Don't put that in. Because we're not just going to say, well done, you've hit 74, you've got it right, or no, you've got it wrong. We're going to try and predict the misconceptions they will have. So the first thing they might do is they might be unsure, for example, and I forget which way around our feedback is here, but that superscript number 2, some students may believe that it applies to every atom in the molecule. So they may think, right, I'm going to count 2 calcium as well. And if you count 2 calcium as well, you're going to come up, as well as 2 oxygen and 2 hydrogen, you're going to come up with the answer of 114. And if I've got this the right way around, if a student puts in 114, the feedback they get will be, there we go, Sue. The superscript 2 only applies to those elements in the bracket. It's a specific feedback for that misconception. But what that allows a student to do is then have the practice. We're not giving them the answer. We talked about students needing to act on the feedback they get. Well, they've got teacher quality feedback there in the absence of the teacher, and now they get to act on it and rework the question and then hopefully put the right answer of 74. Another student may have no idea what that number 2 means. So they may just add the calcium, the oxygen, and the hydrogen together and come up with the answer of 57. So if they type in 57, so this is the feedback they're getting here to actually say, well, hang on, no, this subscript number 2, it has a function, the brackets have a function. And again, they're getting that feedback in the absence of the teacher, but they're not just simply being given the answer or told the wrong. They then have to put it into practice and work to get the answer correct. Now, if they're not making those obvious misconceptions, if they're just typing something random in there because they really don't know what's going on, then they need more general feedback about how to arrive at the answer. And that is what we can see on the screen there. So what we're really trying to do is everything we've just said here. This feedback is at the point of need. The student has got a question wrong, bang, they've got it. They've got the feedback right there. And that feedback is, as we tailor it, to try and predict the misconceptions that the student will have. So it's as specific as we can possibly make it for those students. And this will free you up to go and help the students that really, really, really need that help. While the other students who can learn and move on from this feedback are they're a bit more self-sufficient without you now. So everybody's getting feedback they need. That's the idea.
Thanks, Al. I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to have a look at it from a math perspective here. So similar thing. This was question 3 in the question set that we just did on ratio. So as I'm looking at this is a math teacher and I'm trying to anticipate misconceptions. I'm going to think, well, the boys, they're going to see that the boys' value is 12. They're going to look and think, well, the girls have 3 boxes there. So I think I'm going to do 3 times 12 to get me the answer of 36, which would be a common misconception on that question. However, this is our feedback. So it is directly alluding to the fact that they've done 12 times 3. And I know why they've done 12 times 3. So I'm reminding them that what they have to do is find the value of 1 part first, which is a really common thing that children will do when you're teaching ratio. We then have the more general feedback, and this is for other answers that they may put in. It's not just a case of saying, no, it's wrong. We discuss the structure of what they need to do. And quite often you'll see it's stepped feedback. Quite often they will only need to read the first step to set them on the right track, to know what they need to do. And typically with ratio, it is that finding the value of 1 part first. That's what you need to do. Obviously, we've got the support of the bar models and everything like that as well. But we're just nudging them towards the correct answer with this. Another one I wanted to show you, this is based on, it's a question set on using trigonometry to find angles, but it's a very sort of the first one they would do. And question 2, it's just getting them to use the calculator correctly, really, at this point. So the things we anticipated them getting wrong for this one would be if they got an answer of 0.01, it would mean they've forgot to use sine to the -1. They've just done sine and 3/5. So that would be a really common misconception. So that's just the nudge, you forgot to use your shift button or things like that. The other thing that they might get, which again, when you've got a sea of different calculators in front of you, is a bit of a pain sometimes. They might put the answer of 0.64 in. If they did that, it would mean that their calculator isn't in degrees mode, it's calculated in radians. So that's another thing that we anticipated might happen, so we can address that with them. As always, we do have a general feedback, which is just thinking what in general might the children do wrong here. And I think certainly for a calculator heavy lesson, and if you're introducing trig, it may just be that they haven't all got Casios or whatever in front of you. They've got lots of different types of calculator, and we need to try and get them to use the different buttons. In the class, it can happen that suddenly 10 hands go up, I've got the wrong answer, miss. that can alleviate this, then it's perfect, and they can move on and get forward with their learning. Okay, so we've already seen from you getting onto the task before how learning by questions can increase the power of feedback in your classroom. But we're just going to dig a little deeper on this now. So the first thing I would say is that it's planned, and Al alluded a lot to trying to predict where misconceptions are going to come from, so you can have some feedback in place ready to go when those misconceptions occur. So LBQ's feedback is also planned. It's written specifically for each question. So when pupils answer incorrectly, our feedback doesn't just point pupils in the direction of a video that covers the entire topic. The feedback drills down to just one issue in that question, often highlighting a common misconception. And it ensures that the pupils are focused on that particular issue, and they can therefore act on it very quickly. They're not just trying to understand a video they didn't really understand in the first place and figure out what's going on with that. The next thing is it's directive feedback. So it's not corrective. And Al just alluded to this as well. We're never just going to say, oh, no, you got it wrong, the answer's 5, because that does not help a pupil's understanding at all. So our feedback, or clues as our pupils refer to them, nudge the pupil forward. They're supporting them in finding their own way to the correct answer. The next thing is immediate, and we've seen how important this is, and I know our audience know that with all the different technology they're using already. It's given in the moment of misunderstanding, and therefore it doesn't allow any time for any misconceptions to become embedded. The feedback's individual, it's relevant, and it's private. So, and this to every pupil. So pupils have no need to feel nervous about receiving feedback. It's private to them and tailored to meet whatever their needs are in that moment. Depending on their responses to a question set, a pupil will receive different feedback to anyone else in their class when completing a question set, depending on what they've done. And crucially, LBQ's feedback allows pupils to act on that feedback immediately, engaging with their learning in a way that increases their understanding, their self-confidence, and their independence in the classroom. Essentially, when working through one of our question sets, pupils have very little option but to engage with the feedback. It's just what they do. So in teachers and content authors, we spend an enormous amount of time writing our feedback. In fact, we probably spend more time writing feedback than we do actually writing the questions. Our aim is for it to be precise, specific, and therefore easy for pupils to understand and act on. This enables pupils to progress through our question sets independently, freeing up your time as teachers in the classroom to spend it with those pupils who need you and your expertise the most. I just want to close before we go to questions and answers on this quote again. I mentioned it before, saying it was a big ask, but I think that by using learning by questions in the classroom, our teachers can make this happen. They've got all of that there. There we go, we're done.
Thank you so much, Sue and Al. Thank you so much. We don't really have any questions on the chat, but I'm going to ask a question. So if anybody does have any questions whilst I'm asking that question, please put it on the chat and I can put it to Sue and Al. But I just want to go back, quite a few people were talking about various different platforms that they use. And I was just wondering if you guys could explain how learning by questions is different to other platforms that people might be using currently.
I think a lot of it comes from what I've just been talking about, how much effort we put into constructing our feedback. The feedback is very, very directive, and it's to the point, and it's very precise, and it drills down to single misconceptions. A lot of the bigger packages will point pupils towards videos, which is fine for an awful lot of children. But if you have got a child who's already struggling with that, to then be directed to a video that probably covers the whole topic and maybe a minute and a half long or something, to find the bit that's relevant to them is really quite confusing. We also spend a lot of time making sure our question sets are structured, so they go from the simple to the complex, and they sort of guide pupils through. And obviously you get all that data, and the data is live, which is the main difference. The live data means that it happens in the moment. You can sort of think, oh, actually, I thought they really understood ratio. Turns out they didn't. So I can now go and have a nice chat with them and really dig down into where their misconception is.
Yeah, I was gonna say just what you finished on there, that as a teacher, we talked about targeting your feedback. The feedback we provide is going to allow students to help themselves. They can act on it themselves. They can help themselves progress. But of course, you've got a range of abilities in the class. And if somebody is really struggling, and they're not willing to put their hand up, they're not willing to ask, they can't hide from you. You can see how they are doing there and then. you know, without even being in the same half of the room as them, you can see exactly how they're doing. So you know where your time is best spent, which I think a lot of the other software out there perhaps don't offer. You know, they might have a lot of strengths, but they don't offer the ability to put a teacher exactly in the room where the teacher needs to be at that time with the student that teacher needs to be with at that second.
Just in reference to some things coming through on the chat there, yeah, we do write question sets, so there's lots of question sets already written. We're all qualified teachers. We've got a lot of teaching hours in our department, so we've all been there and we've all taught the content, so we do structure our question sets very carefully for you to be able to use.
Somebody's just put on the chat, and I'm very aware that I'm going to need to speak, so I'm going to stop typing, and I am actually just going to answer this question. So somebody's asked how much it is to buy, and it's £250 per teacher. There is a volume discount. The best way to find out to have a volume discount is to get in touch with us, because it's so variable with sizes of departments. Some schools want to do cross departments, sometimes we're dealing with trusts and it's, you know, it's cross schools and stuff. So best way to discuss that so that we can personalize it for you is to contact info@lbq.org. I'll put that information on the chat as well. Great, I think that is all the questions. So if it's all right, I'm just going to take over the screen for a sec, Sue.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So share screen, there you go. Okay. Well, so thank you so much to everybody who has come this afternoon. It's just so lovely to be able to share good practice with big groups of teachers. Like it's just fab. If you have enjoyed today, don't forget to sign up to any of our other webinars. We've got another 2 left. One on inclusive teaching next week and one on behaviour the week after. And if you are interested in trialing any of my questions, you can do that absolutely for free. So I'm just showing you the screen now where you can do that. So if you go to lbq.org and you can go into using LBQ and try LBQ, and that'll take you to this page here. And you can choose between the 14-day LBQ light trial, which is where you can just jump straight in. You could have a go at that today. You could get some assessments done tomorrow if that's what you wanted to do. Or you can do LBQ supported, which is a 6-week trial. It's a little bit longer and it's a more personalised approach so that we can make sure that you're using LBQ to tailor to your needs, basically. So if you book a time in with us and we can have a chat about how's best to use it, we can give you a little bit of training on how to use it best as well. So yeah, visit Learning by Questions, and thanks very much, and thank you to Sue and Al for such a great webinar. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks,
Have a nice day. Bye.